My name is Selena Hartwell. I'm 29 years old, and I work as a paralegal, the kind of job where details matter and silence holds more than people think. If there's one thing I've learned about family, it's that the loudest laughter often hides the sharpest blade. I knew that before the Hartwell reunion started. I just didn't know the blade would come for me in a raised glass. Late afternoon, our backyard looked picture perfect. Folding tables under string lights, bowls sweating in the heat, relatives sliding on their best smiles. I took my usual seat at the far end of the long picnic table, the safe place, close enough to be counted, far enough to be ignored. I'd learned to become furniture at these things. People lay their elbows on you, then forget you were ever there. Aunt Ruth bragged about her remodel like she'd poured the concrete herself. Uncle Marcus talked taxes through a mouthful of brisket. My brother Damon worked the table with that practiced grin people mistake for kindness. And my mother, Evelyn, glided between conversations like a hostess on television, hair smooth, tone warmer than the weather, eyes cold as the ice bucket. The Hartwells have always been good at together. We learned it like a language. Smile, glide, pretend. Evelyn lifted her glass. Her rings caught the sun and threw it around the yard. "You know," she announced, bright as a bell, "if Selena vanished tomorrow, would anyone even notice?" The words landed soft as a joke. The laugh that followed was not. It rolled down the table in waves, cousins first, then the uncles, then even the quiet ones, like they'd been waiting for permission. I looked at the condensation sliding down my water glass and watched a drop race another to the rim. I didn't flinch. This wasn't new, it was only louder. "Don't be sensitive," my mother added, the way you might shoo a fly. "We're only having a little fun." "Are you finished?" I asked. My voice sounded like it had taken off its shoes. Chairs scraped, forks paused. Damon smirked at his plate. Evelyn tilted her head, studying me like a smudge on a window. I tapped my fork against my glass. Once, twice. The sound cut the air clean. People turned. Conversation died. I stood slow and steady and reached into my bag. My fingers found the heavy paper that had been waiting there for weeks. I placed the sealed envelope in the center of the table, between a sweating bowl of potato salad and a bottle of cheap rosé. No one spoke. "Some things," I said, "play better without a laugh track." Across the yard, my grandfather watched from beneath the oak, unreadable behind his glasses. "Before we open anything, I want to hear from you. Where are you watching from tonight? Leave a comment and tell me. Then come back. You'll want a front row seat for what happens when a joke meets the truth." I didn't sit back down. I kept my hand on the envelope like it might try to run. Sunlight flickered through the leaves and landed across the table in broken squares. My mother's smile went brittle around the edges, the way sugar cracks on a brulee. "What is that supposed to be?" she asked, bright but tight. "A correction," I said. I slid a finger under the flap and broke the seal. The paper inside had that heavy feel you get from lawyers who mean business. I unfolded it once, twice, and laid the pages flat where everyone could see. Letterhead, signatures, witness lines, and the round, dark notary stamp that takes the guesswork out of family stories. "It's an amended will," I said, keeping my voice even. "Grandfather's. Dated, witnessed, notarized." Someone at the middle of the table laughed the way people laugh in church when they're not supposed to. It died quick. I placed a fingertip on the first page. "The primary residence," I read, "the surrounding acreage, the lake cabin, and the accounts listed in Schedule B, assigned to me." No one reached for a phone. No one reached for the potato salad. The whole table seemed to lean toward the paper and away from me at the same time. Uncle Marcus lost a shade of color. He'd been holding a rib like it was a gavel. Now his hand hovered with nowhere to land. Aunt Ruth made a little sound and covered it with a cough. Damon stared at the document with the same half smile he used on parking attendants, the kind that says, "I'm sure we can work this out." "You're bluffing," he said, like he was doing me a kindness. "If you doubt it," I said, "read it." I pushed the top page an inch toward him. He didn't touch it. My mother did what she always does when the room won't obey. She turned to the crowd and tried to bend it. "Everyone relax," she chirped. "Selena has been under a lot of stress at work. She's misread something." "The signature is his," I said. "So is the witness list. You know both names." Evelyn's eyes moved over the stamp, the dates, the legal language she usually treated like background noise. Her lips parted just enough to let the air out. She didn't sit. She didn't breathe. She studied the ink as if she might wish it into softer shapes. Across the yard, under the oak, my grandfather lowered his newspaper and met my eyes. No smile, no warning, just a small, deliberate nod that said, "You're not mistaken." I turned the second page so the notary seal caught the light. "There's a copy with his attorney," I added, "and with the bank." The forks on the table lay like little white flags. The cousins didn't giggle. The uncles didn't clear their throats. Even the ice quit clinking in the bucket. Damon leaned back, ran a thumb along his jaw. "You really think this makes you the hero?" he asked softly. "I think it makes me honest," I said. My mother's voice dropped a register. "You're lying." "Am I?" I asked. "Then read it." For a moment, the only sound was the neighborhood traffic drifting over the fence, a faraway lawnmower humming like a bad memory. Then chairs creaked and a few people stood, not to leave, just to get their balance back. I gathered the pages and squared the edges. "This isn't a performance," I said. "It's a notice." My grandfather folded his paper and set it on his lap. The nod was gone. He didn't need it anymore. The sun slipped lower, taking the color out of the string lights before they had a chance to glow. Someone tried to start a new conversation about traffic on the interstate. It went nowhere. The reunion had the wrong temperature now. Laughter didn't fit. The evening thinned out into a long, careful silence that felt like the inside of a church and the edge of a cliff at the same time. No one reached for seconds. No one asked for the recipe. People drifted toward the cars in twos and threes, speaking softly like there was a sleeping child nearby. I stayed where I was, the envelope back in my bag, my hands flat on the table. By the time the last door closed and engines rolled away, the backyard didn't look like a party anymore. It looked like a room after a verdict. The morning after the reunion, my phone started buzzing before the coffee finished dripping. Unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. Then it rang again. On the third call, I answered. "Ms. Hartwell, this is Student Accounts at Fulton University. We're calling to confirm your request to cancel tuition coverage for Damon Hartwell for the fall term." "I didn't make that request," I said. My voice sounded steadier than my hands felt. "Please note that on your end. No change, no permission." "We'll document that," the woman said. "If you have an authorization code." "I don't, because I didn't call." I hung up, stood very still, and listened to the apartment settle. Pipes, a neighbor's door, the skitter of something on the fire escape. None of it meant anything, but the noise made a pattern I didn't like. I opened my email. Nothing sent, no drafts, no login alerts. The text started next. "Are you okay? And what's going on?" And I didn't want to believe it either. I hadn't looked at social media yet. When I did, I didn't have to scroll far. Aunt Ruth had written a long post about vulnerable elders and outside influences, careful not to use my name. My mother left crying face emojis like she was attending a funeral online. Damon posted a photo on campus lawn with a caption about learning who loves you for real. There were hearts, there were prayers, there were people from high school I hadn't thought about in a decade offering wisdom in the comments like they lived at our kitchen table. Then came screenshots of old messages from me, real words, wrong shape. A sentence lifted out of a bad night. Sometimes I think they won't respect me until I take everything away. I'd written it once after another fight with my mother. Stripped of context, it looked like a confession someone had been waiting to frame. I closed the laptop and stared at the ceiling like there might be a leak to explain the feeling under my ribs. 10 minutes later, I called grandfather. "They've started," I said. "Of course they have," he answered. His tone was calm, like we were discussing the weather. "Don't swing back yet. They're hunting for your temper." "So I just stand here?" "You stand still," he said. "You have what they don't, records. Let them spend themselves." I changed every password I owned, then changed the recovery emails too. Bank, cloud, cell carrier. I turned off an old shared drive Damon and I used years ago for school files and pictures. It felt like closing windows in a storm you should have seen coming sooner. At 12:17 a.m., my phone buzzed again. Not a call. A motion alert from the living room camera I'd set up when the building had a rash of break-ins last year. I tapped the clip open. A hooded figure slipped through my door, head down, hands sure. No forced entry, no pry marks. Straight to my desk. Straight to the bottom right drawer where I kept old returns, paid bills, copies of letters from grandfather. The person didn't ransack, they selected. 5 minutes in the room, 5 minutes out. The door closed soft. I scrubbed the footage back and forth, frame by frame. You couldn't see the face, but you could see the knowledge. Whoever it was had been here before. Whoever it was had a key. There was only one other spare, and I'd handed it to my brother 2 years ago when he couldn't afford a hotel over spring break. I never asked for it back. I watched the clip again until the image blurred and the hood looked like a shadow I'd invited into my own home. I pictured Damon's half smile at the table, the way he didn't touch the paper even when I pushed it toward him. I pictured my mother's rings throwing sunlight while she laughed. I didn't call anyone. I didn't post. I set the camera to high sensitivity and double-locked the door. The apartment was quiet, too quiet, the kind that turns small sounds into threats. The hum of the fridge, the drip in the bathroom, a radiator tick that had never seemed this loud. By morning, a new thread had started on a message board I didn't know my relatives read. A stranger asking for both sides. People love both sides when one side is a rumor. I made coffee, let it go cold, and poured it out. I thought about grandfather's voice. Stand still. So I did. But standing still isn't the same as doing nothing. At first light, I drove to my grandfather's house without calling ahead. The road out to his place runs through old oaks that keep their shade even when the sun means to burn it off. He was on the porch with a mug and the paper, the way he always is, front page folded, glasses low on his nose. I handed him my phone and let the security clip play. He watched without interrupting. When the hooded figure slipped in and out, he made a sound that could have been a sigh or a decision. He set the phone on the table between us and looked at me for a long moment, not sorry, not surprised. "They're playing it dirty," he said. "So you don't." "I need more than a will," I said. "You've had more than a will." He rose, slow but certain, and disappeared inside. He came back with a thick brown folder, my name in his careful hand across the front. "Open it." Inside were typed transcripts on clean letterhead. Dates, timestamps, initials. Each packet had a notary page clipped to the back, the seal dark and round. There were witness statements, 2 neighbors, 1 bank manager, each signed and dated. Chain of custody notes ran along the margins, boring and beautiful. He tapped one transcript. "A month before the reunion," he said. "Your mother and Marcus on the phone." I scanned the lines. Marcus: "If we move early, we can get a line against the property." Evelyn: "She won't touch a cent. We'll make sure of it." My throat tightened, not because I was surprised, but because I wasn't. I turned another page, a voicemail from a loan officer about documentation inconsistencies. An email where Damon's student account was CC'd on a thread from Evelyn's address. I kept records, grandfather said. They rewrite what they can't stand to say out loud. Paper doesn't flinch. I slid the folder closed and stood. I'm going to Damon's. The hallway outside my brother's apartment smelled like old carpet and microwave noodles. He opened the door with that quick practice smile that drops off when real life walks in. I stepped past him and set the folder on the counter. You broke into my place, I said. He blinked. What? No, what are you talking about? Read. He hesitated until curiosity shoved pride out of the way. He flipped the first transcript open, eyes skipping down the page, then jerking back to the top like he'd fallen on the last step. He found his name on the third packet. In an email string about expediting preliminary paperwork. This is fake, he said, paper crumpling a little where his fingers pinched. You made this up. It's notarized, I said. There are copies with grandfather's attorney, with my lawyer, and with the bank's fraud unit. Try me. He glanced toward the door as if the right answer might be waiting in the hall. You're blowing this up, he said, softer now. For what? For the truth, I said, and for the part where you stop using my quiet as cover. We stood in the stale kitchen air, the old fridge buzzing like a fluorescent light. He shook his head once, the way people do when they're trying to shake off a story they told themselves. I left the folder where it lay and walked out without slamming the door. The silence I left behind did the work. By the time I got home, the temperature online had changed. The Facebook post about vulnerable elders disappeared. The thread on the message board was gone. Damon's account flipped to private. No victory laps, no apologies, just absence where noise had been. Grandfather called that evening. They're quiet, I said. They're regrouping, he answered. Quiet isn't peace. Keep your footing. I checked my locks again and set the camera sensitivity higher. The apartment held its breath. In the kind of quiet that used to comfort me, I felt the new shape of it. Thin, stretched, humming like a wire. Too quiet. The doorbell rang just after 9, a firm press, not the jab of a neighbor or the lean of a salesman. I checked the peephole and saw my father on the landing, shoulders squared, a small wooden box in his hands. I hadn't seen that box in 10 years. I opened the door. He held it out without stepping in. Do you remember this? He asked. My grandmother's jewelry box, I said. We thought it was lost. We were told it was lost, he answered. He walked past me and set the box on the table like he was returning a passport. Then he pulled a manila folder from under his arm and laid it beside the box. You need to see what I've been looking at. Inside were photocopies of bank statements, loan applications, and emails printed in neat columns. At the bottom of each packet was a date stamp from a law office I didn't know he'd retained. Signatures sat where they shouldn't. One looked like my grandfather's, but the curve of the W had the wrong slant, and the witness line was blank. I confronted her, my father said quietly. She called me disloyal. I called our lawyer. He pointed to the loan applications, 2 of them, both attempts to pull equity out of my grandfather's house. The supporting documents were a mess. Mismatched dates, a letter from a consultant who used my Uncle Marcus's company address, a thread where Damon's student account was CC'd, his name tacked on like an afterthought that told the whole story. Why bring this to me? I asked. Because I've spent years keeping the air calm and calling it love, he said. Silence isn't peace, Selena. It's consent. I'm done consenting. He exhaled, a long, old breath. I filed for legal separation this morning. My attorney has sent all of this to the bank's fraud unit. I looked at the jewelry box. The brass clasp still stuck on one side the way it did when I was a kid. He worked it with his thumb until it clicked. Inside lay a string of pearls, 2 old photographs, and a folded note in my grandfather's hand, edges worn. My father didn't touch the note, neither did I. He closed the lid. She hid it, he said, not as a blame, but as a fact. I can't fix that. I can only stop standing in front of it. We stood in the small apartment kitchen while the fridge hummed and the hallway clock ticked through a minute that felt longer than it was. I poured him water. He didn't sit. He looked older and somehow lighter. "Thank you," I said. He nodded once, a movement so slight you could miss it if you wanted to. At the door, he paused. "They'll change shape now," he said. "Don't mistake quiet for surrender." After he left, I packed the folder with my other files and slid the jewelry box onto the top shelf of the closet where the camera could see it. The apartment felt rearranged without moving a chair. Near noon, my phone buzzed with a message from Fulton University. Due to new information submitted by the Hartwell family, a temporary hold has been placed on the student account of Damon Hartwell pending investigation. I read it twice. I hadn't contacted the school. Neither had my grandfather. The timing told its own story. The bank had moved, the school had noticed. Within 10 minutes, Damon started calling, then texting. The first message was, "Fix this." The second, "You're ruining my life." The third was a string of question marks, like punctuation might shake a better answer loose. I didn't reply. I watched the screen go dark and stay that way. I turned the ringer off and set the phone face down on the table beside the jewelry box I could finally see again. Outside, the day kept going, the sound of a bus brake, a dog arguing with a squirrel, a delivery truck double-parked and unapologetic. Inside, the quiet settled into its new definition. Not consent, not surrender. A line had formed. I stood on my side of it. The invitation came dressed up as reconciliation, a mediation downtown to clear misunderstandings about the estate. My grandfather's lawyer asked if I wanted to attend. I said yes. Some things need to be said in a room where the lights are too bright to lie comfortably. The office had glass walls and the kind of soft carpet that eats footsteps. The receptionist smiled like she'd seen this 1,000 times. Inside, the conference room was all chrome and polite arrangements. My mother sat straight-backed in a pale blouse and pearls, every inch of her engineered for sympathy. Uncle Marcus leaned back with his arms folded, the picture of reluctant patience. Damon kept his hoodie up and his eyes down. My father took the end of the table, hands folded, face calm in a way that reads as tired when you've lived with it long enough. The mediator, a woman in her 60s with a tidy bun and kind eyes, cleared her throat. "Thank you all for coming. We're here to address concerns about the Hartwell estate. Let's see if we can find a path forward." "My path is simple," my mother said, voice smooth. "My father was not of sound mind when he signed whatever my daughter thinks she has. We just want what's fair." I set my folder on the table and unclasped it. "Then let's talk about what's not about the will." My mother blinked. "Excuse me?" I slid the first document across the table, face up. Exhibit A, the Hartwell Trust, established 6 months before the amendment to the will, independent corporate trustee, irrevocable, funded, beneficiary, Selena Hartwell. The mediator adjusted her glasses to see the letterhead. My mother didn't touch the paper. Marcus did, with 2 fingers, like it might stain. He skimmed, then frowned, then checked the date. Damon stared at the edge of the page as if he could read by osmosis. "It's real," I said. "Verified by the trustee. The will could be disputed for the rest of the decade, and it wouldn't matter to this." My mother's voice lost half a shade of warmth. "You expect us to believe he hid this from his family?" "He didn't hide it," I said. "He protected it." The mediator nodded once, a neutral acknowledgement that lives somewhere between surprise and inevitability. I opened the folder again. "Exhibit B," I said, and laid out a neat row. Bank letters regarding attempted equity lines against my grandfather's house. Call logs. An internal email noting inconsistencies with supporting documents. "You'll see Mr. Marcus Hartwell referenced here." I tapped a paragraph. "As a consultant. And here," I tapped another page, You'll find an address that matches his firm. Marcus sat forward. This is out of context. The context is dates and signatures, I said. And the part where my brother's student account is CC'd on a thread he had no business in. I slid that email to Damon. He didn't reach for it. His jaw worked once and stopped. My mother's composure thinned. Enough, she snapped, and then softened it for the room. We are here to repair, not to accuse. From the end of the table, my father said the same word but differently. Enough. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The sound cut cleaner than my fork had at the reunion. You've called this repair for years, he told her. It's control. I'm done pretending not to know the difference. For a long moment, no one spoke. The air conditioner hummed like a clock you can't see. My mother turned back to me, and the truth slipped before she could dress it. He was supposed to leave it to me, she said, almost a whisper. He did, I said. He left you the consequences. The mediator folded her hands. Mrs. Hartwell, the documents are clear. Today may not be the day to contest them. Color rose in my mother's cheeks. She looked at me like I'd reached across the table and taken something out of her mouth. You've torn this family apart. I stopped being your glue, I said. That's different. I gathered the papers slowly, squared the corners, and slid them back into the folder. The zipper sounded loud in the quiet room. This isn't about winning, I said, standing. It's about ending a pattern. Chairs creaked. The mediator began to say something gentle about next steps, about follow-up dates and separate rooms and cooler heads. I didn't sit back down. I closed the folder and held it under my arm the way you carry a passport in a bad airport. My mother watched me like she was waiting for me to blink first. I didn't. I walked out of the glass box into late afternoon glare. The city sounded normal. Buses, a horn, someone laughing on a phone. Inside me, something had been turned off and something steadier had come on. I went home, set the folder on the table, and let the quiet hold. The changes didn't trumpet themselves. They showed up as absences. My mother's profiles went dark first. The Facebook that never missed a holiday post. The Instagram that treated family as a brand. Gone. A week later, my uncle's company website redirected to a new name with a fresh logo and the same address. Under new management, the landing page said, which is one way to outrun paperwork. The university email came next. Please be advised that Damon Hartwell has withdrawn for the current academic year. No apology, no blame, just a line you could file. He didn't call to explain. He texted once, "You happy?" And when I didn't answer, nothing followed. Silence can be a kind of education. My father called sometimes in the early evening, not to unburden himself, just to check the weather where I was. He asked whether I was sleeping. He told me which grocery store had the good peaches this week. His voice had room in it I hadn't heard since I was a kid. Grandfather kept to his schedule, one call every few days, the tone even. He never asked for updates. He told me about the blue heron that took to the creek again, the neighbor who tried to train a beagle to heel and got dragged down the lane instead. Once he said, "People who worship control mistake quiet for defeat," then changed the subject to baseball as if the thought were a coat he was hanging up. At night, I opened the jewelry box and touched the edge of the folded note without unfolding it. Not yet. The pearls lay there with their own soft light. You remember the feel of these things because your hands were smaller when you last held them. In the second week, a letter from the bank arrived addressed to my grandfather, CC'd to me. It thanked him for his cooperation and confirmed that the matter regarding attempted equity lines had been referred to the appropriate department for review. No drama in the language. Just steps being taken in rooms without windows. I stopped checking the message boards. I stopped clicking on names I didn't need to read. I went back to work, put my head down, and moved documents from the pending pile to done. My boss didn't ask why I suddenly preferred the quiet tasks. He let me file. One afternoon, my mother rang my bell, and I didn't open it. I watched through the peephole. She stood there with her hair loose and her lips pressed into a line, the performance stripped away. She didn't call my name. She didn't knock again. After a minute, she left, a slow sway down the hall, small in a way I had never seen her. I didn't feel triumph. I felt distance. When the phone did ring that night, it was my father. "She came here first," he said. "What did you do?" "I made coffee," he said. I listened. Then I told her I can't hold up walls that are supposed to stand on their own. We were quiet for a while. The apartment hummed, the same way it had on bad nights, except the sound meant patience now, not dread. Before bed, I finally unfolded my grandfather's note. The paper was thin from years, and the edges had softened. His handwriting ran true across the page. Peace never required permission. Keep what is clean. I put the note back and closed the lid. The latch clicked the way it should. The window over the sink let in a line of cool air. I switched off the light and let the dark be only dark, not a place for anyone else's voice. 2 months later, I moved into the lake cabin my grandfather loved. The road there breaks from the highway like a sentence that chooses a different ending. Pines stand close and tall, and the air carries a clean edge you can taste. I brought what I needed and left the rest in boxes I didn't plan to reopen. The cabin door stuck the way it always had. I shouldered it once, and it gave. Morning came with a fine mist rising off the water. You can hear the creek before you see it. I made coffee on the old stove and opened the windows to let the cold thread its way through every room. The quiet had a different weight here. No neighbors, no sirens, no elevator cables humming behind drywall. When you set a cup down, the sound belongs to you. I hung a coat on the back of the same chair where my grandfather used to read. The wood remembered him. Old furniture does. I unpacked slowly, a few books, files that had earned their rest, the jewelry box on a high shelf where the afternoon light can find it. I didn't put out photographs. Not yet. I let the blank walls stay blank like a promise I didn't want to rush. My father called the first evening. He asked about the weather like he always does and told me he'd found a decent mechanic who didn't try to sell him a new car. He didn't say her name and I didn't ask. Before he hung up, he said, "You sound more like yourself." And I said, "Maybe I am." Grandfather called on Sunday, same as always. He wanted to know if the chimney drew right and whether the porch boards still groaned near the middle step. I told him they did. He said, "Good, a house should speak a little." And then we compared notes on the birds at the feeder. When I thanked him for the trust, the records, the letter, he changed the subject to the creek level, as if gratitude should be acknowledged but not lingered on. That's how he is. News from town came thin and factual. My uncle's rebrand held. The bank's letter became another letter with more, referred to council, pending review. Damon stayed quiet. My mother stayed gone from the places she lived out loud. Absence can be loud too, but the trees took the edge off. Days settled into their own shape. I walked the path down to the water and back, learned which stones were loose and which would hold. I cooked simple food and ate all of it at a table that didn't carry anyone's voice but mine. At night, the cold pressed against the windows and the stove answered in small clicks. I slept. Not every hour, not every night, but enough to call it sleep without an asterisk. One afternoon, a hawk circled over the lake, slow and deliberate, riding a current I couldn't see. It passed once, twice, then kept going, unbothered. I thought about the reunion table, the fork against the glass, the envelope between the potato salad and the rosé. I thought about rooms where people confuse performance for truth, and about the way paper steadies a hand. I sat on the porch steps until the boards warmed under me. The creek went on saying what creeks say. I didn't rehearse speeches. I didn't compose posts. I let the quiet be work and reward at the same time. Before sundown, I opened the jewelry box and unfolded my grandfather's note once more. Peace never required permission. Keep what is clean. I put it back and closed the lid. The latch caught. The line between then and now stayed where I left it. When the first star showed in the shallow dark, I went inside and shut the door. The porch light didn't come on. It didn't need to. The house held steady, and so did I.